Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyk, and welcome to my studio. Yes, today I'm going to paint a portrait. My favorite subject, actually. And I don't know whether I ever talked to you about how important it is to pose the model in a way that is very representative of that person's personality. If a person is haughty and proud, I'm apt to take a perspective of looking up at her to accentuate that characteristic. If a person is shy and sweet, I may look down a little bit at her to show that in a pictorial way. And so the posing of a model is really the first step of getting an interesting portrait, not only of the person, but the person's attitude. Well, I'm going to do a portrait of a real doll. Not someone who just poses well like a real doll, a real doll. And she has a personality, and because she's inanimate, I would like to have the picture have some kind of attitude, an attitude that describes her. Let me introduce you to my model. Isn't she cute? Let me go over and talk about her. She's very old. And you can see it's old-fashioned, and she's, well, her heel is coming off of her little shoe, and she sure doesn't look contemporary. She looks as though she's been stored away. Not really forgotten, but unused. A little sad doll, yet still has the cuteness that she had when she was adored. And so I put her on a shelf. She's on the shelf. I thought that would describe her or give me a feeling that maybe I could project into my picture. So why don't I show you how I did this little dolly and talk about how I'm doing it as though I were doing a person. There isn't a picture alive that hasn't been started with a composition. And so the composition in portraiture is usually the way you work with the actual model and put that person in a position that seems advantageous. And I've already done that. I have her on the shelf, and now my compositional problem is to place her in a way that it's going to project that feeling of, well, I'm not used anymore. So I've decided that I'm going to put her top of her head here, and she's going to sit on the shelf here. I want to actually show the shelf, so I'm going to leave some room for that. I'm actually going to show the fact that this is also part of the shelf. This is a little construction, and maybe I can actually show that this is the corner. And so I've got to kind of fit her into that space element. And so I have the problem always of getting in the drawing. And I'm sure you're going to see what I'm going to do to get the drawing right, or as relatively right as can. I'm going to measure her head and see how many heads she is high. Well, she's a head and another head and a little left over. So down to here, it's a head and another head and a little bit more. I'll do it again. 1, 2.5. 1, 2.5. 1, 2.5. Her head's going to take up that much space. And her little body is here. And her arm comes down this way. And her costume is that way. And her little skirt comes out like that. And this leg shoots out this way, and this leg shoots out that way. And I feel as though this situates her on the canvas in a way that she looks as though she enjoys being on this canvas. She doesn't look as though she's falling off of it. She doesn't look as though she's rising out of it. She's been adjusted to the, and there's a cast shadow behind her, which I think would help out, would make a interesting addition. And I do find that when I'm working from a model, I think very carefully about how I'm going to organize the tones of the background to help present the model in an advantageous way. And so in this particular case, this cast shadow I think is very important. I think it's just going to help her look shelved, which is not very nice of me, but that happens to be her characteristic. I don't think that this is the happiest of little dolls. She's awful cute, though. Doesn't belong to me. A friend of mine owns it. She has a whole collection of dolls. In fact, I did a painting of dolls. And again, I'm doing this in acrylic, and I'm going to do it very fast because I want a lot of time to show you how I'm going to work out the little girl. Because I want to talk about her flesh color. Everybody's worried about the color of flesh. Well, I have to paint her flesh. She has a certain kind of flesh. It has to look like dolly flesh. Yet it's the same color as alive flesh. So it's a matter of observing it carefully. These cute little shoes. And so that gets me started, and the cast shadow underneath. Now, let's go back to the basics. And there's nothing more basic than knowing all about light and dark. I have put darks wherever the light can't strike. I've left the canvas white where the light is striking. If you don't look for the lights and darks and just see the dolly, you've almost looking at her in a way that she'll be impossible to paint. But looking at the lights and darks of her makes the painting process possible, because I make my paint do to the canvas what the light does to the subject. Hallelujah. All right? That's as much as I'm going to do with the underpainting, to show you that I always start a portrait by placing the model on the canvas in such a way it suggests a mood. You can see by my painting that I finished all the values. Not all of them, but the basic ones. And now the picture is at stage, well, I've done 3 stages already. The first stage, very important, posing the model and then presenting that pose on the canvas. That's 1. Drawing is 2. And then establishing the basic values is 3. Now I'm into stage 4. The more stages, the more steps I take, the better my picture will be, because I direct my thoughts to each stage and what each stage accomplishes. They say if you're going to have to take go 1,000 miles, you got to do it a step at a time. And there's a lot of miles to getting from start to finish on a painting. And so now I'm going to do the next stage, and that is introducing the basic colors. I can't get involved in all the little colors because this is so far away from color, but I can introduce the basic colors that I see, and I'm going to do that by putting in the colors rather thinly, so the colors are going to be fortified by the values that I already have put down. Why don't I start right out with the red of her dress? By having an underpainting of gray, and of course the underpainting is dry, it gives you a chance to start very positively. You don't have to start with the background. You can start right in with the focal point of the picture. Because let's see what happens. Yeah, that's a good color. How did I mix it? Windsor red and alizarin crimson. I've mixed the paint with a little painting medium. Not a lot. I'll show you what happens if you use too much. See, it's weak. See how weak that is? Because a lot of people think that a glaze is thinned down paint. It is thinned, but it's not watery. Excuse me. And that red does take off and become kind of pretty and bright where my underpainting is light. And gets dark. Where the red goes over the dark areas. Just to be practical, I think it'd be better to introduce the flesh color on the arm before I get that close to the arm with the red. Far easier than having to get that close to the red. See, it's much better to scrub that color in so it attaches itself to the underpainting. It's be easier to work on if it doesn't move that much. Oh, how nice to get the red over that dark tone and have red in shadow without having to mix it. No one cares how much you suffer over the way you paint, so you might as well do it the easiest way you know how. And I think that 2 coats is an easier procedure than trying to do it all in one. There's flesh color. If I were working from a live model, I would have already had to have given her a rest. I would have already had to adjust to the fact that she was a fidgeter. And this one's sitting just as quietly and as nice as can be. And those little old shoes. My goodness. But that doesn't look right. Too much color, that's better. But the yellow is brighter, so I picked up a brighter yellow. Oh, I like that better. And her flesh color. This flesh color that I used on her arm is the same flesh mixture I'm going to use on her face. But on the face, it looks different because her little face is so much in shadow. Add a little bit more color in there. Oh yeah. And then she has that little blouse on, which is yellow with age. Sure, it was lighter than that at one time. More white. And the background color. A bigger brush, dip it into the painting medium, clean the brush off of the excess medium, see if that brush is clean. Oh, my palette isn't clean there. Everyone is worried about dirty color, getting the right color, and so much of it is a clean brush, a clean palette, and the right application. A color that is the right color, well, seemingly right color, but is too thin would not be the right color. So it's a marriage of the mixture and the application. Now I think that I'm going to make that background have more of a greenish look. Just a feeling of atmosphere. In painting a portrait, you always have to think about what color background you're going to use. Well, In portraiture, usually gray is the best choice, leaving all the coloration to the model. This gray-green is one that I often use. And that's just a breath of green, sap green, burnt sienna. Here it's going to be in shadow, so I'm going to put a little red in it. And it becomes gray because it's being painted on top of gray. I think I mentioned that Herb and I went to Holland and recently to the Rembrandt show. And they had x-rays of his paintings. And it was so interesting to see the underpaintings. The x-rays went past the outer look of the picture into what was how he started. And you could see the boldness of the light and dark of the underpainting. You could see how the subsequent painting then made the bold patterns more delicate. It would be so wonderful to go back in time, to actually go back in time and sit in the corner of his studio, find out. But I look at his paintings and it doesn't look that strange to me. I can understand how he did it, I just don't know how he did it so beautifully. Now, such a nice, quiet start. My paint is wet, but not dripping. It's not thick. If it were thick, it'd be very hard to dig into it. And so I have it colorful, and I have the basic shapes. I'm going to take 2 lessons to do this picture because I'd like to see what a little bit more time will do for me. We never do get a chance to just put in an underpainting and glaze it and say, well, we're done. You always need to develop it a little bit more. Or I like to develop it a little bit more because it looks a little bit weak. I'd like to do something to this background. Yes. Not repaint it, but rub into it with a little bit more color to illuminate it. Seems a little bit more atmospheric that way. I hate to see a background terribly, terribly smooth. When I look into space, I kind of see a movement of air. And putting a background in little strokes like this helps to suggest that movement of air. I'm sure you see that cast shadow very sharp. And I'm not making it that way. Why? Because I don't want it that way. I want to see maybe a little softness about it. Because one big sharp line would be rather attractive to Not attractive in that it's wonderful, but it would attract attention. So I don't want that. And very often, the inside of the shadow needs some color in it to be reflected light. And so it looks as though I have no more time to work on this, but I have a whole other lesson. And I'm continuing my painting of the old dolly on a shelf. And it's very much like doing a portrait. And right now, I'm going to start developing her flesh tones on her arms and on her legs and on her face. So let me get right into the painting of the picture and see what will happen by developing these colors. And this is the stage of a painting that I really like to do. And I like to leave a good amount of time to do it, because rushing at this particular time just makes me inaccurate. And mistakes then have to be fixed. And then very often a painting looks overworked. So I think I'll fix this leg first. Fix it and develop it. Make it lighter. It's so nice to work this stage because I have the benefit of what I already have done. I can respond to it. For instance, on this, I want to make this a sharp edge to make it look as though there's something happening to that shape. And now I'm going to sharpen this and lighten it at the same time. And I'm going to have to come up further to her little dress because I've moved the model. She hasn't moved, I've moved her. A little trouble. It's a good idea, everyone, if you're going to paint something such as this little dolly or a still life or something, to construct out of a big old box, a shadow box. So you can put your subject in it, and it is very movable. You can, if you don't finish and you want to work on it again, and if you have to take it away from where it was situated in your studio, you might move the drapes or move it in a way, and if you this way you can pick up the whole box and put it in the corner until you're ready to work on it again. I always put my subjects in a shadow box. Because my studio is right in the middle of our house. And we often have, almost every night, we have dinner at the table right by the window, by my north light. It's just it's the hub of our house. And so if I'm working on something that's in the middle of the room, I can roll it away because my model stand does have wheels. Or I can put the setup on a shelf. But I often try to paint within the framework of our living conditions. A lot of people say, oh, gee, painting is so messy. I don't like to get my house all messed up. Oh, no, don't think about that. The pleasure is worth it. And it's not that messy a job. And with an easel set up and an unfinished picture on the easel, people come in and say, boy, someone very interesting lives here. People like to see something in progress. Well, she's very much like a human in that she has a highlight here and here. Not the same, not one big highlight, because I've got to make a accommodation for the elbow. Now, that poor little face. That face is in shadow. I can't use these colors because then she wouldn't look as though she's in the position that she's in. So I have to, well, I'm going to not use those. I'm going to mix a darker, duller version of it. Some raw sienna and some cadmium red light. Maybe I'll make that thin and rub that color on rather than put it on as in such a healthy condition as I did the legs and arms. Well, I think I have to make that a little yellower, or she's, so let me put this in it. Burnt umber. She's got an awfully cute little face. Cute little nose. And then her upper lip sticks out. And then her cheek almost hides her eye. I don't know, can you see that? You know, I'm in such close quarters here. I don't know whether you can really see what I'm doing. That's her other little cheek. And here's her jowly, and there's her chin. A little light is sneaking, just past this, lightening this cheek a bit. And hitting the end of her nose. She doesn't have a very nice expression. Let me see. Let me try to put a little dark. Is that the brush I want? No, I want a smaller brush. Oh, a sharper little brush. Let me try this one. No, that's not it. I'll never get it with that. Try this one. I'm trying for that little, tiny little dark line that indicates her mouth. And I think I'll correct the silhouette of her face with that shadow in the back. Now you know what it's like to get the shape right, to get the likeness. That's getting better. Getting a little better. Being very careful about the little shapes. And I think I'm going to push her face, her head, her hat back a bit. And now the little eye is darker. Well, anyway. See what happens. See what happens when I do all the values that make up the appearance of her face. There's a wonderful dark on the rim of her hat. The end of her nose is too blunt, too sharp. Going to be rounder. Why don't I add some lights to her little blouse? And I see a light along here for her little collar. Some more lights. Always think in terms of doing as much as you can by adding light. A lot of people say you have to do the darks first. Well, I have it I have the darks suggested. But I like to continue the appearance by adding light and then just use the darks I need. Yes, if I had a lot of time, I'd be very careful to put this in to start to suggest the plaid. We're trying to think of who this little girl represents. Little Red Riding Hood? No, I think she had a hood. This one has a distinctive little hat. I like to have a lot of time to do this. This is not enough time because I want to look and accurately understand the shape. All these little shirrings. Such a cute little pinafore. You see this showing on this side. And the bib across. I need this dark tone from the bonnet to silhouette her head, silhouette this sharper. Yes, now I'm into doing the darks. And the darks are always applied into areas that are already dark. So they don't look like dark smudges. They look like accented shadows. I like to paint primarily, but I especially have a wonderful time when I see something that intrigues me a lot, and then I want to try my hand at it. We paint our experiences. Of course, so much of my experience is, or my living experience is, doing these shows for you. And so instruction ends up to be a major part of my inspirations. I think, what could I paint to show them something that's important? And I think that I like to paint a variety of things to prove to you that if you learn the basic principles, you can paint anything. You really can paint anything. The principles then are your guide for anything that you might want to do a painting of. And the basic principles are they give you great leeway. They don't stop you. They start you on the right track. The principles of composition, the principles of drawing, the principles of light and dark, the principles of color and complement, the principles of sharp lines and soft lines, or the found and lost line, the principles of color application, paint application. And all these principles come from nature. You paint, you want to make your pictures look natural, and so you study nature to make your pictures look as natural as nature. And that's what books on basic painting principles are all about. Analysis of nature, and you say, gee, I understand it, and so you understand it and you can do it. Oh, always a test of patience. You say, oh, I don't want to do that hand, but you got to just get down to the nitty-gritty and say, I'm going to look at it very carefully and do all the elements that it is. Well, one thing, it doesn't look right, it doesn't have a thumb. And it is lighter. Come on, Helen, get it lighter. Because it's tipped up toward the light. Oh, there. And I paint this way for the bulk of her hand. And then down for the fingers, stopping at the knuckle. If I don't like the way this looks, I can always maybe fix it by going opposite to make it look more round. I can always take a brush and sharpen the edge. If I had the time to show you, I'd have to, well, I'd first would have to let this painting dry completely so that I could then add the plaid. And that would be to glaze it on, but I'll try to just sneak it on. And so it goes across this way, and then it changes, and then it seems to go this way. Then because it's further down here. Would make such a big difference to have all this plaid because it's so much characteristic of the little doll. But you can see that this would be best applied onto the red once the red is dry. Many people are working in acrylic nowadays. And acrylic acts very much like, I mean, acrylic in color, really, you know, just use acrylic as your medium until, as your paint rather than oil. And you wouldn't have a problem. That would all be dry. It would all be dry already, and you could add this on without any trouble at all. Ho, ho, ho. The only thing that you have to put up with when you work with acrylic is that everything dries right away, and you never get a chance to wipe it off or blend it in. I like to work in it now and then, but my goodness, been working in oil so many years. I can't shake the habit. So lights to the lights. Would be so nice to take the time to make that shoe look broken. Someday I'm going to design another lesson all about cast shadows. Can't really stress their importance enough. Each value that you add to your picture defines the drawing, and nothing defines the drawing quite as much as the cast shadow. Oops, I just made her too thin. Oh well. It's fashionable to be thin. And I can lift this little skirt up by putting a cast shadow over here. Set this little foot down by putting more of a cast shadow there. Let me go back to the face. I'm not satisfied with it, but there's nothing I can do about it sometimes. I think I'm put a little lighter here. You diddle with it until it's done. if it goes too far wrong, you wipe it out and you start diddling from the start again. I can't resist that, right there. Those little buttons, I'd make a big deal of those buttons if I had the time, because it's so, and I'd like to make her sit back into the shadow more. Oh, I hear my little bell. That bell means I have to stop. Next week we're going to have a sewing lesson, or maybe I'll teach you how to make soup.
Hello, I'm Helen Van Wyk, and welcome to my studio.